पीटीसी न्यूज़ ਇਸ ਖਾਸ ਪੇਸ਼ਕਸ਼ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਰੇ ਸਭ ਦਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਹਾਂ ਸ਼ਿਖਾ ਧੂਰੀਆ ਵਿੱਚ। ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਅਜਿਹੀ ਖਾਸ ਸ਼ਖਸੀਅਤ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਰੂਬਰੂ ਕਰਵਾਉਣ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਜੋ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਭਾਰਤੀ ਮੂਲ ਦੇ, ਲੇਕਿਨ ਭਾਰਤੀ ਮੂਲ ਦੇ ਹੁੰਦਿਆਂ ਉਹ ਕਿਸੇ ਹੋਰ ਮੁਲਕ ਦੀ ਨੁਮਾਇੰਦਗੀ ਭਾਰਤ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਰਨ ਆਏ ਨੇ। ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਅਨ ਹਾਈ ਕਮਿਸ਼ਨਰ जो कि ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਆ ਦੀ ਨੁਮਾਇੰਦਗੀ ਭਾਰਤ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਇਹ ਭਾਰਤੀ ਮੂਲ ਦੀ ਅਜਿਹੀ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਮਹਿਲਾ ਨੇ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਅਜਿਹੇ ਅਹੁਦੇ ਲਈ ਹਾਲ ਹੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਿਯੁਕਤ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ। ਅਜਿਹੇ ਅਹੁਦੇ ਲਈ ਨਿਯੁਕਤੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਤਾਂ ਵੀ ਖਾਸ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਭਾਰਤ ਤੇ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਆ ਦੇ ਰਿਸ਼ਤੇ ਕਾਫੀ ਹੱਦ ਤੱਕ ਬਿਹਤਰ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਸਾਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਇਸ ਕੜੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਾਫੀ ਕੁਝ ਹੋਏਗਾ ਔਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਐਕਸਪੈਕਟ ਵੀ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਫਿਲਹਾਲ ਉਹ ਚੰਡੀਗੜ੍ਹ ਪਹੁੰਚੇ ਨੇ ਖਾਸ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਇਸ ਫੇਰੇ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਕੀ ਕੁਝ ਖਾਸ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਮਿਸ ਹਰਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੱਧੂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ। ਵੈਲਕਮ ਟੂ ਪੀਟੀਸੀ ਨਿਊਜ਼, ਮਿਸ ਹਰਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੱਧੂ।
Thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be here.
So, as my first question to you, you being a first Indian origin Australian High Commissioner representing Australia and India, so what do you feel about this? How's your role?
I'm the first from Punjab, so I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I think, India is a very important country for Australia, but so we try to send people over who can take the relationship forward. I feel I have a special connection, I suppose, with India that hopefully I can use to move the relationship forward for the benefit of both our countries.
Since few years, India and Australia are coming very closer in the field of bilateral relations, nuclear energy sector and many other aspects too. So how do you feel about such relations these are building up, and when do you see this nuclear energy sector can start?
Oh, right. Okay. So you're right to say that Australia and India have come together dramatically, I think, in recent years. We've had a long-standing relationship, as you know, but it has really accelerated in recent years. In 2009, we created a strategic partnership between the two countries. Our two prime ministers met each other in 2014, and since then, I think we've seen a real acceleration. On the nuclear sector specifically, Australia has been very keen to cooperate with India, so I'm pleased to see the Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement concluded. We've also been very supportive of India in other areas in the nuclear field. The arrangements for the Nuclear Cooperation Agreement are now in place. I mean, theoretically, trade can start tomorrow. But as we know, you can't switch these things on and off. It takes time to conclude contracts and so forth. So we're hopeful that will happen very soon.
Okay. Ms. Sidhu, from India, a large number of students heads toward Australia for higher studies. So my question is, many incidents were there before of racism activities. Now, in today's newspaper also there is another happening of racism through social website. So what is your take? How can we combat such things? And do you think such happenings left any negative remarks on the students who went there?
So I think, look, any outbreak of racism, be that happen in Australia, if it happens in India, if it happens in any country in the world, I think is a terribly unfortunate thing. It is something that as the Australian government we do not support, we condemn absolutely. There is nothing in the Australian system that would support that behaviour at the official level. We're a very successful multicultural country, very successful. We have brought people from all over the world who have lived and settled in Australia and have enriched our country and made it the strong, vibrant democracy that it is today. Like every country, we have people at the fringe. And so those people exist. The point is, where is the mainstream of Australian society? Most Australians are very welcoming and accepting of people from other nations. We have a very high rate of ethnic intermarriage, for example, in Australia. We've had incidents where there have been attacks against somebody because it's racially motivated. The vast bulk of the Australian community stands up and argues against it and protests against the racist behaviour. So these are fringe elements it's important to understand. The Australian government runs a number of programs to fight against racism and cyberbullying, which is a terrible aspect of this. So we've seen this case and this case. Raising the awareness, showing people that you don't accept this behaviour, these are the sorts of things that we do to try to combat this.
How many immigrant visas are being issued this year from Australia?
Australia has a global immigration program, so we take immigrants from all over the world. That stands, and it's been running for decades. The numbers stand at about 150,000 a year. It varies from year to year. The government sets a global quota. There is no India quota inside that global quota. The Indian immigrant applicants, when they apply and their application is successful, they kind of go into a global pool, and when we hit the quota, they wait till the next year. Most people who get through eventually do make it to Australia, and that's something that, as I say, we run as an active program. Why? Because we want people to come from other parts of the world, settle in Australia and contribute to our society and our economy. We've done very well out of it. We really encourage it.
So, my next question is, how do you see these growing terrorism activities worldwide? And ISIS is a big threat to the humanity, to the world.
Yeah.
So, has there any changes been made in immigration policies in the wake of such activities from your country?
Not specifically. I mean, we've been very careful, and I imagine we're looking more closely at people who are applying to see if they may have any connections. But you know, it is a very serious issue from the Australian perspective. The way we're fighting terrorism is not through the immigration policy.
Right.
It's actually through working with our domestic communities in Australia to avoid young people being radicalised and going overseas to fight. It is a very serious problem. The other way we're working on terrorism is we're cooperating with other countries. It's only when we all work together that we can actually fight this scourge. The events that we've seen happen recently in Munich, in France, in Dhaka, in Turkey, they're all horrific events, and they're not certainly, you know, very worrisome. And the way we work on this is that we all cooperate together, we share information, we make sure that we can identify people who may be at risk at an early stage. We're doing the same with the Indian government, and I have to say I very warmly welcome the cooperation we have with the Indian government on terrorism matters.
Apart from terrorism, there are many activities like fraud, travel agent, fake marriages, consultants. And so Australia has been seeking help in combating such things from Indian police. So are you satisfied with the response of Indian police?
Yes, it's been very, very good. Our cooperation with the Indian police is excellent, I have to say, very, very good. We have very strong information sharing arrangements. They are very vigilant and very quick to act on anything that we ask them for. We've found it a very satisfactory relationship. So when it comes to ascertaining the credentials of somebody, or it's very important for us if somebody's going to come to Australia that we are persuaded that that person is coming to Australia for a genuine purpose. And so working not just with the police but with other parts of the government and society, we are able to ascertain that about a person and you know, really make sure that we run a program that is to the benefit of the genuine applicant.
Right.
And that's the most important thing, that genuine people get through, and we know that genuine people basically can almost always demonstrate their bona fides. They can always show the right documentation, and they can be very, you know, it's very clear that they can go there. And it's good to see that we're seeing so many more Indians fit that bill. So the numbers of students going from India to Australia is growing dramatically. Indians are now the second largest international student cohort in Australia. That's a very positive sign.
सो गल्लां बातां दा सिलसिला इस तरीके नाल जारी रहेगा, पर फिलहाल एक ब्रेक ਲਈ ਅਸੀਂ ਰੁਕ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ। ब्रेक ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਵੀ ਮਿਸ ਹਰਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੱਧੂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਬਾਤਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਿਲਸਿਲਾ ਇਸੇ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਾਰੀ ਰਹੇਗਾ। ब्रेक तो बाद थोड़ा सब का स्वागत है। अज असी अपने रूबरू करवान आए थानू सब नू मिस हरिंदर सिद्धू जो कि ऑस्ट्रेलियन हाई कमिश्नर ने और इंडिया नू ऑस्ट्रेलिया नू रिप्रजेंट करन आए ने इंडिया दे विच और ऑफिशियल फेरी इन्हां दी चंडीगढ़ पंजाब हरियाणा दे विच चंडीगढ़ दे विच असी खास तौर ते उन्हां नाल मिलन आए और तुहाड़ी रूबरू करवान आया। फिलहाल उन्हां नाल गलबातां दा सिलसिला जारी करदे हां। मिस हरिंदर सिद्धू, सो व्हाट आर द एरियाज इंडिया एंड ऑस्ट्रेलिया कैन कोऑपरेट Will it be renewable energy, environmental issues, sustainable development, or will it be areas like agriculture, dairy farming, poultry? So can we see any new agreement in such fields?
Oh, there's so many fields we can cooperate on. There's so much that India and Australia have in common that we can work together on. So, all those areas you talked about. Dairy, I think, is a really important area, very key one for this region. Australia is a very big and very efficient dairy producer. Not as big a dairy producer as India. India is probably the largest in the world, but we have very high productivity. So every Australian cow produces nearly 5 times as much milk as every Indian cow. And you might ask the question, how have we done that? Well, we've really tried to use technology by using genetics, breeding better cows, raising cows in a particular way, looking at the way they're fed, etc., etc. All of those things have led to very high productivity. And we're actively talking to India about how we can work together in the dairy sector, including in the food processing dimension and, value adding on the production. So agriculture is definitely one area. Environment and particularly water resource management is the other one. Australia is a very dry country. We have very little rainfall, and we certainly don't have a monsoon. We would love to have a monsoon, but we don't. So we've learned to really manage water very carefully and to preserve every single drop of water as much as we can. And so they're the kinds of things that we can share with India. How do you irrigate fields using much less water, but still getting the productivity you need? How do you keep your waterways clean and sustainable and healthy so fish can grow and biodiversity can improve and waterways stay clean and drinking water is available for all? And how do you work across boundaries? Where a river runs through 3 or 4 states, how can we actually work things so that farmers get the water they need, but people and towns get the water they need? All those things.
So in totality, there are many areas.
Many areas.
So, ma'am, there is a growing trend of FTA, free trade agreement, worldwide for promoting bilateral relations. So, are India and Australia also planning to sign such agreement in near future?
Yes, well, we've been in negotiations on what we're calling the Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement for quite some years now. And we made an enormous amount of progress last year in the negotiations. I think it'll be very good if our 2 countries are able to conclude the free trade agreement negotiations. Then it would have what we call a head-turning effect. A big part of what we're trying to do is to, attract India to Australia and attract Australia to India. Yeah. And what's the magnet that will do that? That would be the free trade agreement. And so I'm very keen to see that happen in the near future.
Let's talk about the Indian community. It's growing stronger day by day in Australia. It has their own cultures, festivals, celebrations. So do we see any more cultural exchange program in both the nations in near future?
Yes, a lot. So the Indian community in Australia, it's about 500,000 people, right. Which makes it about 2% of the population. Now that may not seem like a lot, but in the last 10 years, the size of that community has tripled. So it was a very much smaller community. We've seen a dramatic growth in the Indian-born population in Australia. And so we now have a sizable community that can do an awful lot more. It is definitely making an impact in Australian culture. Australians have always been great lovers of Indian food. It goes back a long, long time. But now you're seeing much more diversity in the food that's available, more exposure to Indian culture. Diwali is now celebrated in every Australian capital city. Last year we lit up the Opera House in the Indian colours as a celebration of Diwali. These are all very important things. This year, in September, the Indian government is bringing the Festival of India to Australia. So it will be a few weeks long cultural program involving song and dance and theatre and film and art, all sorts of things, so Australians can have the chance to experience this. The Australian government thinks it's such a good idea. We've actually contributed some money towards that because we see it as a great benefit to both our nations.
You talked about the love of food
Yeah.
Australians have. So what about you? You love Punjabi food?
I just love food, full stop. But I definitely love Punjabi food. Do you know, I had my first Amritsari kulcha only a few weeks ago. It's not something I'd ever had before, but my God, I loved it. It was wonderful. It was really lovely. Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay. Ma'am, how well Punjabis are doing in Australia? Since we see the Canadian Parliament has such a large number of Punjabis.
Yeah, yeah.
So how well Punjabis are doing in the growth rate of Australia? How do you see that?
No, Punjabis are very, very successful in Australia. By and large, they've come to Australia, settled and done extremely well in all manner of fields, in professional fields, in business, in sporting fields, for example. So, you know, there are a number of Punjabis. Rupinder Kaur, for example, she was a wrestler who represented Australia at the Commonwealth Games last year. And we've also had Punjabi cricketers, Punjabi boxers, all kinds of sports people in Australia. We're seeing a great deal of activity, I suppose. So they are doing very well. We don't see as many in Parliament, that's true, although 5 Punjabis ran for the federal election in various seats this year. Right. And so we do have a senator, Lisa Singh, who is of Punjabi origin, and a couple of the others got very close. We just don't have the size of the community that exists in Canada that would make it to Parliament. But that's growing, and I'm sure it'll happen over time.
Okay, so Punjab, how do you see Punjab's growth rate right now? How do you see that? Punjab is growing very fast.
Yes, it is, yes. I think Punjab is growing very fast, and I think that there's a lot of scope for Punjab to actually drive that a lot faster. You know, it's a very... Punjab, if you think about Punjab as a state, it's got a great number of assets. It's got a very thriving and probably very successful agriculture sector. It has a population that's highly educated, and literacy rates in Punjab are very, very high. So there's a lot of potential. The young people in Punjab have a lot of potential to achieve things. And we see that in the entrepreneurialism, in the adventurism, the Punjabis being prepared to go overseas to study or to work or to set up businesses wherever they go. So I see that Punjab has a great deal of potential.
So as Punjab is seeking help in the areas of skill development, clean energy, so how Australia can help Punjab in achieving these goals? Yes, how do you see that?
Absolutely. So in skill development, for example, we've just signed an MOU. We've had many Punjabis go to Australia to study and to undertake skill programs. What we've started to realise is we're a small country. We can't train everybody. So we are bringing skills providers to Punjab. So an Australian company called Hero has just signed an MOU with the Punjab government and is now setting up and providing skills training in a whole bunch of areas. That, you know, assuming that goes well, I can see other Australian skills providers following suit. And that's really going to, you know, drive forward the skilling relationship.
Okay, ma'am. So how successful your visit in India so far? You have been, it's your first visit to Chandigarh. So you'll be moving to Punjab very soon?
Yes, that's right. So I've been in India. I took up my post in February, so it's only been a few months. This is my first trip to Chandigarh, and obviously it's an official trip where I'm meeting people, very senior people for the first time, who I have to say have welcomed me very warmly, and I'm very, very pleased with the warm welcome I've had everywhere I've gone. I won't be travelling beyond Chandigarh this time, but in future I genuinely hope to visit Ludhiana, Patiala, Amritsar, you know, all those places that are so iconic, I think, for many Punjabis as centres, not just of our religion and faith, but also of our community.
So you said you love Punjab, and you must be loving Punjab's famous destinations, famous food, and those famous things which attracts people like you in Punjab, like fulkari. You said you love fulkari.
Oh, I love fulkari. Yes, I do. It is, I just think, a wonderful craft, and I haven't seen yet a fulkari dupatta or a piece of fabric that I haven't liked. It is the imagination, the creativity, and the skill that goes into fulkari. I totally love. Yes, absolutely.
So you visited Nada Sahib yesterday. How was the experience?
You know, it was a very important and profound experience for me. You know, the Sikh community in Australia is still quite young, and we don't have established gurudwaras. To be in a gurudwara that is so iconic, that was a place so closely associated with Guru Gobind Singh Ji, I think was a very important moment for me. And
Right.
It was a very special experience. It really meant a lot.
Okay, in the last year, anything you want to say to the Punjabi community in your mother tongue, in Punjabi?
मैं बहुत खुश हाँ कि मैं पंजाब विच आके.
Very nice. So,
Thank you all. I wish you all the best.
thank you so much, ma'am. So, ਇਹ ਨੇ ਮਿਸ ਹਰਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੱਧੂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ origin ਦੀ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਅਨ ਹਾਈ ਕਮਿਸ਼ਨਰ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਭਾਰਤ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਆ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਪਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟ ਕਰਨ ਆਏ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਆਪਣੀ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਆਫੀਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਵਿਜ਼ਿਟ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਾਫੀ ਅੱਛੀ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਕਹੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਕਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਆ ਵਿੱਚ ਅੱਛਾ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੋ ਨਸਲੀ ਘਟਨਾਵਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੇਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਾਂ ਇੰਡੀਅਨਸ ਨੂੰ ਡਰਨ ਦੀ ਉਸ ਨਾਲ ਕੋਈ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਅਨ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਕਾਫੀ ਹੱਦ ਤੱਕ ਕਾਫੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਅਜਿਹੀ ਘਟਨਾਵਾਂ 'ਤੇ ਨਕੇਲ ਕੱਸਣ ਲਈ ਔਰ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਟਾਈਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਜੋ ਦੁਵੱਲੇ ਰਿਸ਼ਤੇ ਨੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਬਾਇਲੇਟਰਲ ਰਿਲੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਹੋਰ ਮਜ਼ਬੂਤ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਦਿਸ਼ਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਆ ਔਰ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਕਈ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਟਾਈਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਸਮਝੌਤੇ ਕਰ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ ਸੋ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰ ਫਿਰ ਤੋਂ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਹਰਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੱਧੂ ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਸੋ ਮਚ ਫॉर ਟਾਕਿੰਗ ਟੂ ਅਸ ਐਂਡ ਅਸੀਂ ਅਗਲੀ ਵਾਰ ਵੀ ਉਮੀਦ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਲਦੀ ਹੀ ਆਓ
Yeah, I certainly will. Thank you.
ਸੋ ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਇਸ ਖਾਸ ਪੇਸ਼ਕਸ਼ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਸ ਇੰਨਾ ਹੀ ਬਾਕੀ ਖਬਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬਣੇ ਰਹੋ PTC ਨਿਊਜ਼ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ